Hello, everybody, and welcome to this conversation. This month, I have a fascinating guest. I have Rachel Cohen from Common Threads Project, the executive director and founder who is joining me from Brooklyn, New York. Hi, Rachel.
Hello, Veena. Thank you so much for having this conversation with me.
You are welcome. So, the conversation that we are going to have is about gender based violence. And both Rachel and I would like to make our viewers feel comfortable about whether they want to engage with the material or not. And so please do as you please. You might find some of the material a little disturbing. Having said that, let us ask Rachel. Rachel, tell us more about your background. How did you found Common Threads Project? Tell us the story.
Well, it's a bit of coincidences, actually. I'm a clinical psychologist. I have been in practice for more than 35 years. It's hard to imagine. And I spent most of that time doing talk therapy, specializing in trauma and working with women in many cases and survivors of gender-based violence through the years. But I came to a point maybe about 10 years ago where I took a big pivot. And I was exposed to some cultural practices that have had a great influence on me and in my thinking about how to work with trauma. I began what has become Common Threads Project at that time. And there were a series of coincidences, which I'm going to tell you a little bit more about as our discussion continues.
Absolutely. So moving on to gender-based violence, it is a difficult topic to talk about. It is rarely discussed. The work that you do is complex, it is deep, and it is time-consuming. Tell us more about gender-based violence.
Well, one of the things that complicates gender-based violence for survivors is the enormous shame that surrounds it and stigma. And in many places, it's simply forbidden to speak about it at all. And one of the things that I began to learn was that there are many ways that people can express the unspeakable experiences that they encounter in life. And most of it has to be done without words. That's where trauma lives deep within us. And it's not only that because of stigma and shame that survivors can't talk about their experiences. It's also because of the way we are wired as human beings to survive. Yeah. So when we encounter the kinds of brutality that these women have survived, yeah, when we encounter life threat, that part of the brain that records experience verbally shuts down. The left prefrontal cortex goes offline in order to promote survival. It's not useful to analyze and think about alternatives. All those functions of that part of the brain are useless. What we need to do is just mobilize. Yes, mobilize, scan the environment for an escape route, for example. So the visual cortex lights up. And those experiences are encoded visually in images. And if you want to access trauma and treat it effectively, you have to access those channels that go much deeper than words and deeper than cognition, where trauma lives in the body, in sensory experiences. Yeah? And that's what we try to do in Common Threads Project, to access those other modalities, those other channels of experience.
Absolutely. So having explained how the experience is stored and processed, tell us more about how it would manifest itself and where you go with treatment and how do you get there to access these memories?
So here's something that I referred to at the beginning as a coincidence, that I stumbled into a phenomenon, a cultural phenomenon that is so powerful that I was swept away by it. And this has now become my life in Common Threads Project. It was something I knew nothing about, okay? And that is the making of story cloths, which is a ubiquitous cultural phenomenon. We see it all over the world in all, whether it's in Chile, where women created story cloths of the experiences of their loved ones being disappeared during the dictatorship of Pinochet.
Yes.
And that's one instance, and it's from those story cloths that the West, they were smuggled out of Chile, and we learned about the atrocities that were being done in Chile at that time through story cloths, actually. I began to explore this more and more and find out all beautiful instances of story cloths being made, whether Zimbabwe or by the Hmong people in Laos and Cambodia. And what they did was find a way to speak eloquently and deeply about their experiences in nonverbal form. Those were story cloths. And as I began to investigate this, I realized, why aren't we as psychologists learning from these practices that are so powerful and so helpful? And I began to integrate that practice into a comprehensive trauma treatment for survivors of sexual violence. And that's really how this all came about. Think about making a story cloth. Yeah. If you sew or you do some kind of crafting, you know that that rhythmic, meditative experience of sewing does something to the body, to the central nervous system, that is profoundly calming. And in that state, you can tolerate dealing with very, very difficult memories, because it maintains a sense of body state in a calm place while you are working through and processing an unspeakable trauma. And there are many other aspects to making story cloths that allow for a healing process to take place as well. And particularly being in a group setting, being able to resolve collective trauma in a collective where you can overcome shame and stigma and feel that you're not alone, and feel a sense of solidarity with others who've been through the same thing.
Absolutely. So Rachel, besides story cloths, there are other creative options for also, which could tap into some of this.
Yes, I mean, really what we're after, you see, in trauma, all domains of human experience are disrupted. Yeah, in starting with the body and our body experience of ourselves, our emotions, our thoughts and cognitions, our relationships with others, and even our sense of spirituality, of meaning and purpose in life, all of that is disrupted. And our interventions must address all those levels of experience. So we do that in our circles. The women are singing, they're dancing, they're moving, they're learning breathing techniques and relaxation exercises. They're learning how to activate so that when their bodies go into that freeze state, they can reactivate. It is very much multidimensional in the work, and it takes a long time. It's not a quick fix. It takes a high level of skill and high level of compassion and patience. And our therapists in the field are extraordinary. They really are heroic in the work that they can do, as are the survivors who have the courage to deal with all of this and not to simply bury it, but to engage and find their resilience and reclaim their dignity, their voices, their sense of agency in the world.
Absolutely. So, walk us through how you work with partners across the world, and in Nepal in particular, how these projects unfold and how they get carried on over time.
So I think for us, it is essential to have a very real and collaborative partnership with our local organizations, local partners. We don't want to come in and impose our methodology. We have a model that we work with together. We work with local clinicians to for them to adapt this model for their culture, their populations, their language, their practices. And there are certain fundamentals, but really we co-create the programs together. And over time, they come to really own this as theirs. The whole process is one of empowerment all across and up and down the line in the projects that we run. That is to say that the local clinicians become, over time, they become more and more expert in the work. We mentor, we supervise, we don't just train and leave. We're there with them all along. And as they grow as clinicians and gain expertise, they begin to supervise others. They begin to train others. This is what's happened in Nepal and is an astonishing process. We have one quite remarkable therapist, Jamuna Shweta in Nepal, who has become the manager of that program. She is training others. She's running right now 4 different circles. And she's quite an inspiring woman who has found her own sense of power through this process. And they are about to, in the coming year, is really very exciting what Together Women Rise is going to be supporting is the process of that organization, Sajadago, which is Common Threads in Nepali, becoming independent and becoming its own organization to carry this work forward. Together we have planted seeds and we nurture it, and that is going to grow into the future. So for us, this is a very, very exciting moment, and also for the project in Nepal. They're beginning to work with survivors of trafficking and with teens more and more. At a moment in life when so much change is possible, when the trajectory of these young lives can really take a new direction. So it's quite exciting work.
Absolutely. I mean, we are honored to be part of this process. I believe you have some story cloths you can share with us and talk us through.
Oh, thank you. I would love to show you a story clip. It happens that the one I have here today at my desk, so I want to show it to you live. It's actually from Democratic Republic of Congo. We have projects on 5 continents now, including 2 projects that are coming, that are just launching in the US with refugee populations and other marginalized populations in New York and in Seattle. So I'd love for members to stay in touch with us on our website and watch for these new developments. I've strayed a little bit from the story cloth. I want to come back to that, but okay. But here's a story cloth from Democratic Republic of Congo. And the reason I want to show you this is to show you how the process of therapy really happens with the story cloth. So here it is. This is a bit disturbing, as we said at the outset. This is called Forced to Marry My Rapist, which is a common practice in Democratic Republic of Congo. Mm-hmm. Okay, you can see this all right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So let's see, here we go. What I want to tell you about this is, you see the figure in white. She's the one who made the story cloth. Mm-hmm. She was raped and held captive, abducted, and brutalized for quite some time. When she came out, her parents and the perpetrator's parents tried to force these two to marry, which is a common practice. And this brave young woman refused. This is not a picture of her wedding, which I'd originally thought. You see her there. She has actually escaped by the time she makes this and has joined one of our circles in the DRC. And that is when she is asked about that white thread that she chose, she says, quoting her, "I made myself invisible because no one really sees me." Mm-hmm. And through the course of the intervention, one of the facilitator in that group says to the other women, who of you has felt also invisible? And what was that like for you? And she got enormous comfort from the sense of others having been in the same place that she was in. I want to show you one other thing about this. If you notice, so her parents are pictured in, her mother is in the green skirt, and the father is a figure in blue, and not the perpetrator. And what you notice about this, what she came to see, what she didn't realize at first, was the mother in green has no hands and no feet, no agency. The father also has no hands. And you can see, if you look closely, you can see the other figures do have hands. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And what she comes to realize and appreciate, and is really a therapeutic milestone for her. She's been enraged with her mother for not protecting her from this hideous incident. And what she realizes over the course of her treatment is that her mother was in the same boat. And she begins to have this sense of connection with her mother as one who was also oppressed, also rendered helpless, also without agency of any kind. And she not only forgives her mother, and overcomes that rage, which allows her to go on with her life, less burdened by that. But she also commits herself to changing that reality. And that's why we talk about moving from victim to survivor to agents of change. That this predicament should never happen to anyone. And that's really the point of the Common Threads work that we do.
Absolutely. Rachel, this is so moving as an insight into what exactly is happening in the journey that you have taken us on. I suppose in your work, you're hoping that over time, these agents of change will bring about cultural change where there's no longer the silence. I mean, the perpetrators get away with the silence and the shame around all of this. So for all of us to have a deeper insight on how this works, is there anything else you want in this very brief moments we have to share with our audience?
Well, what I have learned most of all is an enormous respect and awe, really, for the women who survive these situations, who have the courage to break their silence, sometimes with needle and thread at first, and later on by raising their voices together in solidarity and to become advocates. And I am simply, I'm quite inspired by them and by watching that process. And it's an enormous honor to bear witness to that. Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much, Rachel, for being here. This conversation is not over. I'm sure our members will engage more with your website, with your online exhibition on your website. And we hope to keep the conversation going. I'm sorry, I'm coughing. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rena. It's been an honor to be here today and to have this conversation with you. Thank you so much. And thanks so much to Together Women Rise for the beautiful work that you all do.